The wind moaned across the plains that night, carrying with it the bite of winter and the lonely howl of coyotes somewhere beyond the ridge. Inside his weather-beaten cabin, rancher Caleb Ward sat by the dying fire, the orange glow flickering over a piano long gone silent. He hadn't touched those keys since the night his wife passed, and the dust upon them looked almost sacred now, a shrine to what once was. Then came a knock, faint, hesitant. He thought at first it was the wind playing tricks, but the sound came again, sharper this time, fragile as a heartbeat. When Caleb opened the door, the cold rushed in, and with it, a small figure stood shivering on the porch. A young girl, soaked to the bone, her hair plastered against her face, her lips moving but no words escaping. The town doctor had called her the mute one, said she couldn't speak. But Caleb saw something else, terror, yes, but also recognition, as though she'd known him long before this moment. Without a word, he stepped aside and let her in. The firelight trembled as she crossed the threshold, her wide eyes lingering on the piano in the corner, the same piano that once filled the valley with his wife's laughter. Caleb didn't know it yet, but that silent girl carried more than fear into his home. She carried a secret, one that would stir the dead echoes of love, loss, and truth buried deep in the heart of Coldwater Valley. Coldwater Valley stretched wide beneath a pale winter sky, miles of open grassland broken only by the dark silhouettes of cottonwoods and the faint glimmer of a frozen creek. Caleb Ward's ranch sat at the edge of that vast silence, a weathered patch of timber and stone that once rang with laughter and song. 2 years had passed since Clara, his beloved wife, had slipped away without warning, her laughter fading like the last note of a melody left unfinished. Since that day, the ranch had grown quieter, the horses moving slower, the lamps burning dimmer. In those days before her death, Caleb's music had been the heart of the valley. At dusk, neighbors would pause their work just to hear the piano drifting through the wind, gentle, mournful, full of life. Now, the keys sat untouched beneath a film of dust, and the only sound left was the ticking of the old wall clock and the lonely moan of the prairie wind. The townsfolk whispered when they saw him, "He ain't really living anymore, just walking through the days." But fate, unpredictable and stubborn as the West itself, had chosen this moment to bring a mute child to his door, a spark of mystery to a man long buried in grief. The girl's name was Lila, though she never spoke it herself. Caleb learned it from a crumpled note tucked in her coat pocket, written in a trembling hand. She barely ate, slept light as a deer, and jumped at every creak of the floorboards. When thunder rolled across the plains, she would curl into herself, shaking as if the sound alone could break her. Caleb noticed the marks on her wrists, faint bruises, like the ghost of someone's grip, and the mud thick on her shoes, the kind that came from miles of desperate running. When word of her reached town, the sheriff rode out to the ranch. "Best send her on her way," he warned, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "That one's trouble you don't want, Ward." But that night, when Caleb found Lila standing before the piano, her trembling fingers brushing one ivory key, something deep inside him shifted. The air changed, heavier, charged with memory. That song she almost played. It was Clara's. Caleb froze, heart pounding. This was no chance meeting. Somehow, this frightened child carried a piece of his wife's past, one that might heal the ache in his chest, or tear his world apart all over again. That it started small, a lantern left burning out by the barn, though Caleb was sure he'd doused it. Then came the soft creak of the porch boards at midnight, the whisper of footsteps vanishing into the dark. One morning, he found a strip of torn fabric caught on the barbed fence, fine wool, city-made, not the sort worn by any ranch hand. A feeling settled in his gut like cold iron. Someone was watching the ranch. Lila seemed to sense it too. Each time Caleb mentioned Jonas Hale, his late wife's old business partner, her eyes widened in terror, and she'd shake her head fiercely, clutching at her locket as though it could ward off evil. Caleb couldn't ignore the pattern. Old ledgers in Clara's trunk showed money missing, lend titles shifting hands, signs of betrayal. The truth slithered through the cracks of memory, whispering that Clara's death hadn't been as peaceful as he'd believed. At night, when the wind brushed against the windows, it sounded like someone breathing just beyond the glass. And through it all, The piano sat in the corner, once Clara's voice, now a haunting reminder of love, lies, and the danger drawing ever closer to his door. Rain lashed against the windows that night, the storm pounding the roof like 1,000 galloping hooves. Caleb sat half asleep by the fire, the room flickering in orange and shadow, when a soft sound drifted through the air, a piano key. Just one, then another. He turned slowly, every muscle tight. There, in the glow of the lightning, stood Lila, her small hands hovering over the keys, pressing the same note again and again, as if searching for something buried deep inside the sound. Then her fingers began to move, hesitant, trembling, forming a melody that stole the breath from Caleb's chest. It was Clara's song, the one she played on summer evenings when the world still made sense. His voice cracked as he whispered, "How do you know that tune?" Lila's eyes filled with tears. She pressed her hand to her heart, then pointed toward Clara's portrait above the hearth. Caleb's heart thundered. The room seemed to shrink, the truth pressing in on him. This girl wasn't just some lost soul who stumbled to his door. She was the living echo of his wife's past, the only one who could reveal what really happened in Clara's final days. The storm had barely passed when Caleb began searching through Clara's old trunk, a chest he hadn't opened since the funeral. Inside lay letters yellowed with time, tied in a faded ribbon, and tucked among them were Lila's childish drawings, rough sketches of Clara's smile, of a cabin, of a man with cruel eyes labeled Mr. Hale. Caleb's breath caught as the pieces fell into place. Clara had cared for this child in secret, hiding her from Jonas Hale, the same man she'd once trusted in business, the same man whose greed and cruelty had ruined so many widows across the frontier. The truth hit Caleb like a branding iron. Clara hadn't died peacefully. She died protecting this little girl. His grief, once dull and quiet, flared into anger and purpose. He'd failed his wife once. He wouldn't fail again. Lila was his to protect now. But somewhere out there, Jonas Hale had already heard whispers that the girl still lived. And a man like that didn't let secrets stay buried for long. The storm returned with fury that night, the heavens tearing open in flashes of white fire. Caleb saw the riders before he heard them, black silhouettes cresting the ridge, lightning gleaming off their rifles. Jonas Hale had come at last, and he wasn't alone. Caleb moved quickly, his heart pounding with a calm born of desperation. He led Lila down to the cellar, her small hands shaking in his. "Stay quiet, no matter what you hear," he whispered. She clung to him for a moment before he closed the trapdoor, sealing her beneath the floorboards. Upstairs, the cabin stood still, save for the piano. For years, it had gathered dust, silent as the grave. But as the riders drew near, Caleb sat before it, fingers trembling. He struck the first note, hesitant, then another. Clara's song filled the air, soft, defiant, heartbreak and hope woven together. Below, Lila pressed her ear to the floorboards, her lips trembling as the melody stirred something deep within her. "Mama's song," she whispered, her first words. The front door burst open. Gunfire split the thunder. Caleb fought with the fury of a man defending not just his life, but love itself. When the smoke cleared, Jonas Hale lay broken upon the floor, and the piano's final note faded into silence. A sound that carried both grief and triumph into the stormy night. Dawn crept slowly over Coldwater Valley, painting the world in soft gold. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean, but inside the cabin, the air still carried the scent of gunpowder and rain. Caleb sat slumped against the wall, blood seeping through the tear in his shoulder, the piano silent beside him. His breath came shallow, but he was alive. Then, from behind him, a small voice broke the stillness. "Thank you." He turned sharply, pain forgotten. Lila stood there at the top of the cellar steps, her face pale, but her eyes clear, her voice trembling like the dawn wind. You spoke," Caleb whispered, his throat tight with disbelief. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Together they stepped outside, where the morning sun touched the earth. Beneath the old cottonwood tree, they buried Clara's music sheets, the pages fluttering like white wings before the soil covered them. For the first time in years, the valley felt alive again, birds singing, wind soft, the piano's silence now one of peace. Caleb looked at Lila and knew He'd been given a second chance, not just to live, but to love again. Even when the world falls quiet, love finds its own way to speak. Clara's melody never truly ended. It lived on in Lila's trembling hands and in Caleb's heart as he learned to listen again. The music that once symbolized loss became the bridge between the living and the departed, proof that love does not fade with death, only changes its voice. Healing, Caleb learned, isn't always found in words or time, but in the courage to remember and begin again. When pain feels endless, love still waits, a song ready to be played once more. The last note of Clara's song lingers in the air, soft as a breath, before fading into the hush of morning. The cabin stands quiet once more, the storm gone, the past finally at rest. Caleb leans against the doorway, watching Lila chase the sunlight across the yard, her laughter rising like birdsong. For years he'd lived behind walls of silence, believing grief had taken everything worth feeling. But life, it seemed, had one final song left for him, and it played through the heart of a child who refused to let love die. Now, dear listener, as the fire crackles low and the wind carries that fading melody across the plains, ask yourself this: if you were Caleb, haunted by loss, yet faced with a child who carried your wife's final secret, would you have opened your heart again, or kept the piano closed forever? Tell us what you would have done in the comments below. And if this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt Wild West tales, where every silence hides a story, and every story reminds us that love never truly leaves the room.